Long-time geologist here in the Goldfields, Andrew Pumphrey, joins me. Andrew gave a submission yesterday at the parliamentary inquiry into the proposed changes to the Mining Act, headed up by Robin McSweeney for the Standing Committee. Morning, Andrew.
Morning, John. How are you?
Yes, sparkling full. Thank you for coming in at such an early hour. Now, Carnival Mining Act was in town yesterday. It's had its run in Perth. It was here in Kalgoorlie-Boulder yesterday. Of the 33 public submissions to the committee, 27 were from prospectors and other goldfields-based stakeholders, concerned entities. How did it all go?
I think it went really well, John. Look, we were really grateful that the committee actually came to Kalgoorlie and they listened to our concerns and they took the time to basically go through every one of the people appearing before the committee and ask some questions, and I was quite impressed with it, actually.
Were the questions asked, or the people putting forward public submissions, was it really focused on one specific area? Was it a broad range of concerns that they have with amendments to the Mining Act?
Oh, look, I guess there were a number of different concerns there, but one of the main issues is a lack of consultation, and we're able to demonstrate quite clearly that the so-called consultation that the DMP has done with the small mining and prospecting community is non-existent, and we're able to produce documentation to prove that. So that was a bit of a revelation, I guess. And we'll just see what the committee thought of that. And it's a big issue for us because we've been basically left out of a loop in this whole process. And we actually only found out about the amendments once they were introduced into Parliament. And we've copped a fair bit of criticism around the place from various political parties, AMAC and a number of other people for so-called hijacking of the bill, etc., etc. But what came out of the committee yesterday was very clear that our concerns were genuine and the committee took them on board. So we'll just have to wait and see what the outcome of all this will be.
You refer to a lack of consultation, but what are the real sticking points outside of consultation? Is it just you wanted to be involved in the loop, or there are actual fundamental flaws that you perceive in the Mining Act?
Well, look, in a nutshell, this sector of industry, the small professional miner and prospector, I mean, some of these individuals are producing $3 or $4 million worth of gold per annum, more than most ASX-listed mining companies. They put a lot of money back into local communities and into shire rates and DMP rent. So they're a significant contributor here. And basically, they've been completely left out of the loop in this whole consultation process. So we find that the DMP has obviously consulted with the CME, it's consulted with AMAC, and this has also had some very limited consultation with APLA, and now APLA have come back on board and are aligned probably quite closely with us. I mean, I'm a member of APLA and some other members of our group, and a lot of prospectors are, so they've been quite strong supporters of this position of this lack of consultation. But what will happen, like they're looking at introducing EMS systems on all mining leases. Now, the Minister stated in a document sent out here to the Kalgoorlie branch of the Liberal Party that not many prospectors hold mining leases. I mean, that's just absolutely absurd. I mean, we've worked out there's probably about 573 mining leases that are held by prospectors, as well as a lot of prospectors that are working under tribute arrangements with companies on mining leases. So, I mean, I work at McPherson's Resources. We have a number of prospectors operating on our mining leases now on POWs, and that will be impacted by this new legislation. I'll be required to include their activities in an EMS system, and this additional burden and cost of this compliance, I'm sure once AMAC members and CME members realise the full implications of this bill, they'll be quite surprised themselves, because it's taken us thousands of hours to actually understand the contents of this bill. Is very complex legislation, and that's what people have to understand. It's not as straightforward as it might seem, and the devil's in the detail. And another issue we've got is the actual low impact activities, or there's LIN and low impact notification. Now, that hasn't been clearly set out in the Act, and they're saying to us, well, look, that can go under the regulations. But again, we're not happy to let the DMP bureaucrats decide the definition of that meaning, and that's one thing the committee has taken on board, that we clearly need to see that put into the actual Act, and that's another sticking point for us. There's also a lot of issues regarding compliance issues, and look, they've always been in legislation that fines can be issued for non-compliance of different environmental requirements. But what they're doing is beefing that up. And one of our big issues is that if they issue a fine for non-compliance, and keeping in mind, most of these fines are being put in place for illegal mining, which we're all dead against. But unfortunately, some of these parts of the Act can be actually used against us as prospectors. And we're aware of one mining company already that has been fined several thousands of dollars and had limited recourse with a DMP. So it is happening. So what we're saying is if these fines and the enforcement part of this Act is beefed up, there's going to be some operators that are going to be non-compliant potentially. And what we're concerned about is that what is a recourse for someone that actually does get a fine of, say, if you get a $20,000 fine, what's your recourse? How are you going to go back through the court system to be basically prove yourself innocent? Now, we've seen cases of this with farmers more recently where they've been fined by the DER for land clearing, and they've had to go back through the whole court system. And there's one good example, Peter Swift. It's taken him a number of years and cost him over $350,000 to rectify an issue where he got fined and prosecuted, and he was proven innocent. So what we're saying is we have to make sure that this part of the Act has some attention to it, and we're not going to be caught.
12 minutes to 7 on ABC Goldfields, talking to Andrew Pumphrey this morning, geologist, put a submission in yesterday into the parliamentary inquiry. Smaller operators are being dumbled into the same basket as the major big multinational companies. That's one of the cries that we're hearing coming out of the parliamentary inquiry. Would you concur with that?
Oh, that's exactly right, and that's what I'm just saying about this additional compliance cost with the EMS systems, etc. I mean, basically right now, if we want to go to a mining proposal on a mining lease, that's going to be exactly the same as a mining proposal for, say, Roy Hill with Gina Reinhardt's company, where they're probably going to disturb 1,000 hectares of land, got 2,000 or 3,000 people working out there in construction. I mean, it's a huge project. So if I want to do a mining proposal on my mining lease at the back of Mulgabby, say, which is going to be a 1 or 2 man operation, I've got to go through exactly the same hoops as what Roy Hill has to go through for their mining proposal. And we just see that as being too onerous on the small operator, and it'll involve us having to use more environmental consultants. And we don't have an issue with environmental compliance. That's not what we're saying. We're just saying that the level of environmental compliance that we need for operating on a small mining lease out here in the Goldfields, which is in an area that's been previously disturbed and mined for the last 100 years, should be completely different to a mining proposal in a new area, such as, say, Tropicana or Gold Road are doing out there at Togruer, where there's no baseline flora and flora surveys or environmental information, should be treated differently to a mining lease application that's being done around the Goldfields in areas where there's lots of environmental baseline information available.
It's been said yesterday at the parliamentary inquiry in one of the submissions that prospectors and small-scale miners will cease to exist if the brakes aren't put on these amendments. Would you concur with that?
Well, look, there's going to be significant cost. We saw at least 2 or 3 prospectors who are, as I mentioned before, are producing $3 or $4 million worth of gold a year, and those guys are going to have to employ more environmental expertise in their mining proposals and annual environmental reports and EMS systems. It's all at a cost, and there's only so long that people are going to be prepared to wear this cost. I mean, another good example of what I'm trying to illustrate here is we heard from prospector Paul Simons, who's a Coolgardie prospector, and he gave evidence that the impact of similar legislation that was introduced in Victoria over 20 years ago absolutely decimated their small mining industries, and their small towns died overnight. I know that firsthand because I've been over to Victoria. I've seen the small mining towns. One of our shareholders at McPherson's, it was a significant gold producer in Victoria, and he's actually expressed the same views to me. So I actually believe that, and it potentially could happen here.
Where to from here, Andrew?
Well, look, we're very optimistic that the committee has listened to our views, and I guess at the end of the day they'll prepare a report that will go to the Minister for his consideration, and we'll just have to await that outcome. That's all we can do. And
just in closing, one of the submissions, or one of the speakers yesterday, stood up very strongly and called for a royal commission and was somewhat castigated by a standing committee, Robin McSweeney there, saying be very careful where you're going with this. Thoughts on a royal commission?
Well, look, I also called for a Royal Commission too, because we think that, the workings of the DMP at the moment is being basically controlled by the Environmental Division. And like, we're all talking about mine closures, but our argument is, well, what are we doing about finding new mines? I mean, the EIS has been a great initiative by the government, but if that gets cut back, I mean, where are we going to go to now? It seems to be the focus in the DMP Environmental Division is all about mine closure. And we're saying, well, what about a sustainable future for the Goldfields? I mean, where is the DMP's vision, their 50-year vision, for the future of gold mining in Western Australia? I mean, I haven't seen that. And to me, this is the essence of the whole argument. We're all worried about the mine closure, which that's important. Mine closure is an important aspect of every mining operation. But what are they doing about ensuring a future for us here in the Goldfields?
Andrew, thank you very much for your time this morning and thanks for coming in.
Thank you, John.
Cheers. 7 minutes to 7, Andrew Pumphrey.